Hello, hello everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the artist and studio manager here at Baltimore Clayworks. We are thrilled that you have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining from my office located in Piscataway and Susquehannock Land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Mac McCusker. Mac McCusker is a ceramic artist working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as the program studio manager at Union Project. Before moving to Pittsburgh, he spent 4 years at Odyssey Clayworks in Asheville, North Carolina, as a resident artist and instructor, and 3 years as a studio manager at Claymakers in Durham, North Carolina. Mac received his MFA from Georgia State University and has taught at Armstrong State University in Savannah, Georgia, and Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. He was named Ceramics Monthly's Emerging Artist in 2018 and exhibits internationally. He teaches workshops and lectures around the country. For more information, visit macmcuskerceramics.com. For more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org. And I will now turn it over to Mac.
Okay, so I'll be showing pictures of my work and also kind of inspiration things that make me want to do the work I do, and also kind of how I got to where I am to do the work, and a lot of information about gender. Okay. Gender is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as the state of being male or female, typically used with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. Sex does not equal gender. Our current gender roles stem from post-war American idealism. Women who worked in factories and came to the aid of America in the time of war were forced to abandon their independence when the men came home. Women were told to become wives, mothers, and caretakers of the home in order to restore the demographic disparity created by the vast amount of young men forfeited to the war effort. Femininity and femaleness is not valued in our society the same way as masculinity and maleness. To alter from these narrowly defined roles was an affront to the very meaning of the nuclear family. Homosexuals and feminists were often linked as an assault on family. They were deviants. Critics of changing gender roles proclaim it would destroy social and economic stability. Uncertain sexual or gender display may well be one of the most destabilizing developments of the last half century, not only for cultural conservatives, but for liberal-minded Americans and Europeans who have come to accept minority categories of sexuality. While Facebook now has numerous descriptions of gender variants, there are still only 2 options on most job applications and legal documents. Although this is changing, gender roles have evolved, but there is still an underlying current that exists from which many of us suffer. The beliefs surrounding the notion of real women and real men reduce us to mere stereotypes. Advertisements, social media, and religious doctrines define a narrow vision of gender norms to this day. Trans activist Leslie Feinberg said, "Those of us who transgress those gender assumptions also shatter their inflexibility. Gender violations are the crux of the many that refuse to acknowledge the colorful presentations and dualities that enrich who we are today." So this is a piece I did while I was in Odyssey Clayworks. While this piece is not specifically about gender, it is about prejudices against those who are still viewed as deviants in society. The uprising of groups such as Moms for Liberty and the demonization of the LGBTQIA community in general has only made things worse. On June 12, 2016, Omar Mateen killed 49 people and wounded 53 others in a hate crime attack in Pulse, a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. I made 49 beer bottles for this installation, each representing a life lost. I chose to make the beer bottles because for me, it signified the gay bar. The gay bar is our place where many of us find refuge and acceptance. We found our chosen families in a place where we were free to express who we are without the threat of violence or aggression. The attack on Pulse was an attack on that space. It was an attack on our place of acceptance and freedom. I made this piece one bottle at a time, cast in clay, a fragile material that represents the fragility of life. Yet it is also a material that will last thousands of years, demonstrating our powerful will to survive and overcome. It is upon the backs of those who have gone before me that I'm able to make the work I do. I had to learn about my history, my queer history, before the days of Google. I listened to the stories from stone butches and drag queens in my neighborhood, any story that they were willing to share. I heard them talk about solidarity and community, of Stonewall, the Pride Parades, Harvey Milk, and Matthew Shepard. Still hungry for my history, I read the words of Leslie Feinberg and Kate Bornstein, searching for where I fit in. Cross-dressing drag queens and gender variants are not new in popular culture. Hollywood has a rich history of putting cis heterosexual male actors in women's clothing for comedic effect. I remember watching the Looney Tunes as a kid. Bugs Bunny was a frequent crossdresser. He has shown up as a Valkyrie, a geisha, a Southern belle, a blushing bride, a flapper, a mermaid, and many others. He has been called the first drag queen by RuPaul, actually, if you look it up. Bugs Bunny has been linked to the vaudeville tradition of female impersonation and even attempts to flirt with male characters. This particular piece is based on one of my favorite Bugs Bunny cartoons, What's Up, or Doc, in which he dresses as a female to taunt Elmer Fudd. John Waters' 1972 film Pink Flamingos stars Divine as Babs Johnson, who lives in a trailer in the woods with her mother and son. It is a satire of the obsession with fame and the incredible lengths to which one can go to achieve it. Harris Glenn Milstead, better known by his stage name and persona Divine, launched into mainstream cinema with the John Waters film Hairspray. He was described by People magazine as the drag queen of the century. He came out as gay in the 1980s and is still a cult figure in the LGBT community. I'm dating myself with this piece, but It's Pat is an androgynous fictional character from Saturday Night Live that was played by Julia Sweeney. The central focus of all the skits is the inability of others to determine Pat's gender. Is it short for Patrick or Patricia? Pat remains oblivious and endlessly frustrates any who subtly question the character's gender. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a 1975 cult classic and parody tribute to science fiction and horror B movies. Frankenfurter is a mad scientist who is an alien transvestite who creates a living muscle man in his laboratory. Rocky Horror dares to unlock and expose the racy underbelly of a repressed America. They were the secret aliens, the offbeat folks who don't fit in or conform. Tim Curry embodied both king and queen, using both genders as seduction in the style comparable of gender-bending allies like David Bowie and Mick Jagger. This is the piece I did that sort of uh, launched my visibility into doing work about being trans. The bathroom bills still sweeping the nation promote discrimination against gay, bisexual, transgender, genderqueer, and intersex people. It catapults transgender people into the spotlight and forces their private lives into a public dialogue. In a one-day specially convened session in March of 2016, the North Carolina legislature passed a law that reversed a Charlotte ordinance that had extended some rights to those who are gay or transgender. It was called the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, or House Bill 2. It was signed into law by then Governor Pat McCrory. The original Charlotte ordinance protected transgender people who used public restrooms based on their gender identity. The new law nullified that and made it illegal for cities to expand upon state laws and protections. This piece, a satirical piece about the absurdity of House Bill 2, places me in the center of the bathroom debate. It makes fun of assumptions that many people make about transgender bodies and about their obsession with genitalia. North Carolina lost millions because of the former Governor Pat McCrory's obsession with where people pee. Concerts were canceled and tourism suffered. Policing gender is not a new trend. Since the 1950s, when women could be arrested for not wearing at least 3 pieces of women's clothing, people have been forced into narrow gender constrictions with little room for deviation. Those of us who are masculine females or feminine males are constantly criticized. Project Canary, Real Life Repercussions of Politics, is a concept created by the socially engaged Craft Collective. On their website, on the meaning behind their name, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote at length and in the starkest and most personal terms about what it means to be policed in America when you're Black or brown. In the final section of her dissent in Utah versus Stripe, a Fourth Amendment case that probed whether the existence of an outstanding arrest warrant could serve as a retroactive justification for an otherwise illegal police stop, she said, "We must not pretend that the countless people who are routinely targeted by police are isolated. They are the canaries in the coal mine whose deaths, civil and literal, warn us that no one can breathe in this atmosphere. They are the ones who recognize that unlawful police stops corrode all our civil liberties and threaten all our lives. Until their voices matter too, our justice system will continue to be anything but." In this project, we are applying Justice Sotomayor's metaphor of a canary in a coal mine to also include gender, immigration status, reproductive justice, and other human injustices, and in addition to racial inequity. The goal is to empower those whose voice is often unheard, making politics real. Art objects were made and dropped in public places for people to find them. These objects were marked with a number and a tag that directed the finder to the website, projectcanary.org, where they could enter the number and read the story that inspired the art. I made the gender neutral figures into magnets, pins, and keychains and dropped them in bathrooms, rest stops, and gas stations across the country from North Carolina to California and back again in response to the bathroom bills. They were each marked with a number that directed the finder to my story. Um, some of the tags actually said a transgender person peed here. I came out in 2008 after many years of alcohol and drug addiction. In 2023, according to the Human Rights Campaign, 41% of transgender individuals attempt suicide. And unfortunately, I'm in that percentage. While being trans is not a choice, being visible and therefore vulnerable is. I didn't know I was transgender when I was young. There was no word for it. There were just words like transsexual and drag queens. Neither of these seem to categorize my existence. Transsexuals are people who transition from one sex to another. Transgender is a term for people whose gender identity, expression, or behavior does not align with or conform to their assigned sex at birth. I medically transitioned in December 2015, shortly after moving to Asheville. Top surgery is the chest reconstruction surgery adopted by some in the trans community to change their bodies to better represent the gender they must identify with. I made the transaction figure series out of a need to see people like me represented in a positive way. There was no trans Barbie or trans Ken, and I didn't like that the only trans narrative seen in public view was the one where we transitioned from one box to a different one. I made these with the youth of today in mind. I am grateful for the opportunities I've had in speaking with trans teens and LGBTQ youth. I cannot imagine having the courage and strength of character to be visibly trans in high school. High school is tough enough. These teenagers are my heroes, and I continue to try to be like them in their persistence and resolve. It is for them that I make myself vulnerable and visible in the hopes that it might one day be an easier journey. Social media use has become so pervasive in our lives. How do you address the negative behavior when you see it or experience it? Some 69% of adult social media users say they have seen people being mean and cruel to others on social media sites. Being out and open attracts attention. I was bombarded by comments and judgment when I became known for the work I was doing, even by prominent members of the ceramics community. This piece is about self care and self repair, the mending of myself in order to put myself back together after the many microaggressions so that I may get up and face another day. A lesson I've tried to learn over the years is to not read so much into the comments. These are some recent ones I've gotten. You have to pick your battles, and some are not worth fighting. No doubt I will not change everyone's minds. There are trolls who intentionally strive to distress or provoke. Anonymity and invisibility help people to feel uninhibited, and we tend to fixate on the negative. Some of us who are trans choose to undergo hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. For trans masculine people, it means taking testosterone. This is a teapot made to look like the testosterone vial with syringe teacups. Being on a platform as kind of the token transgender individual in the clay community can take its toll. When I lectured at NCECA in 2017 on the panel Gendered Clay, I had no idea what would happen. I wanted people to hear about the ridiculousness of the bathroom bills. Making the work was then reactive, not premeditated or intentional, but I thought the cause worthy of sacrificing my anonymity, but it took a while for me to be able to navigate it. I made this piece when Trump decided to change the definition of male and female to exclude transgender individuals, thus erasing our existence. And another one, when the ban on gender affirming healthcare began. I can't separate my art from my life. When I'm asked to talk about my artwork, I can't do so without talking about my life. And I do wonder sometimes if I'll ever be able to make any different work. But I am more than my transness. This piece is about me being just like everyone else, putting on one shoe at a time. In 2016, when I transitioned, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, or GLAAD, reported that only 16% of Americans knew someone who was transgender, leaving 84% learning about transgender people through the media alone. A poll in 2021 found that 42% of people know someone who is trans. In 2024, fewer than 1 in 3 likely voters personally know someone who is transgender. Those who do report nearly double the rate of sympathy for transgender people. So it is getting better. This is the piece that's in the current show. I went to my first Transgender Day of Remembrance vigil in 2008. Since then, almost 5,000 transgender individuals have been murdered, mostly transgender women of color. The actual number is likely higher as many deaths go unreported. Transgender Day of Remembrance was started in 1999 by transgender advocate Gwendolyn Ann Smith as a vigil to honor the memory of Rita Hester, a transgender woman who was killed in 1998. The vigil commemorated all the transgender people lost to violence since Rita Hester's death and began an important tradition that has become the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. In her words, Transgender Day of Remembrance seeks to highlight the losses we face due to anti-transgender bigotry and violence. I am no stranger to the need to fight for our rights, and the right to simply exist is first and foremost. With so many seeking to erase transgender people, sometimes in the most brutal ways possible, it is vitally important that those we lose are remembered and that we continue to fight for justice. Bring Me My Flowers While I'm Alive is a tribute to transgender lives lost simply because they exist in a world of misinformation and ignorance. My hope is that the next generation accepts the fluidity that exists in all genders. No one will ever live up to the antiquated stereotype that has been the definition of what real men or real women should be. November 20th is National Transgender Day of Remembrance, and on that day, I hope you will remember this piece and think about the vast numbers of transgender people being murdered, especially trans women of color, dying because of gender expression. So because of all this work, I've been in many publications, Ceramics Monthly quite a few times, and Studio Potter quite a few times. I'm actually on the board of Studio Potter now. I'm in 3 books. I've done lectures at universities, Harvard included, high schools, galleries, and conferences. My question is, will I stay there if my work changes content? And it's something I've really struggled with lately. Everybody wants to see the picture, so I'm showing the pictures. Lucas Silvera, the transgender lead singer of the band The Clicks, wrote about the selfie. The selfie, often viewed as self-indulgent, self-absorbed, narcissistic. I've seen many folks who take issue with others' photos of themselves celebrating their own beauty. I used to think the same thing before I fell in love with myself. I see it now very differently, especially among marginalized folks, especially those who historically have gotten no or next to no representation in the media and mainstream pop culture. From folks of color to disabled folks to folks with bodies considered different. I find the selfie actually quite a radical art in these cases. It is us saying, I take accountability for celebrating my beauty. I also love it because as a single trans bodied person who went through part of my transition in states of singlehood and without much family around me, it was the only way I could keep a record of my life, my personal history. So I have to ask you to ask yourself, why do you take issue? Why are you annoyed with how someone loves themselves? Why do you feel that self-love equals self-indulgent? Perhaps it is this mentality that creates the propaganda to integrate inside you, which is that to love oneself is actually a negative thing. Why? Because self-love leads to less desire to purchase things, to make us feel valuable, thus making self-love the most fucking radical tool for revolution you could ever have. So next time you see someone post a selfie, love them for it, because odds are if you hate them for it, that's about you, not them. So I was thinking when I was getting ready for this show, like how many things have really changed since 2016, and I was thinking really not much. It's kind of gotten worse, which is unbelievably sad. So currently, the Human Rights Campaign declared a state of emergency. We have all of the anti-trans bills going on right now. Some of the things these bills do is limit trans people's ability to play sports, limits the ability to use bathrooms that correspond to their gender identity, hasn't changed since 2016, greatly restricts access to receive gender affirming care, and forces schools to out trans kids to their parents. Trans adolescents should not live in fear of violence. Parents should not live in fear of being hunted down by the government for loving and supporting their children. And then there's this guy. And now they're targeting adults. I saw this the other day. And yeah, are you kidding me? I can't believe people actually believe this crap. However, In the 9 years I've been making this work about me, about being trans, not one single piece has ever sold. Almost all of them live in a storage unit in North Carolina. I have, I think, three or four with me. There's a constant weight upon those of us burdened by the internal external obligation to educate, and it's exhausting. The work is depressing, especially today. I continue to try to find meaning in the work I have done and am doing, but I do have an upside. I'm contacted frequently by high school students, college students, trans and gender nonconforming people, and parents of transgender kids. They're either seeking advice or they just want to say hello. They express gratitude for my visibility and tell me that provides hope for them in their own lives and their futures. So looking back, I have no regrets. I chose to live my life authentically and to give a voice to others who can't or choose not to be visible. It's not an easy journey, but it was rewarding to be able to share my experiences and to educate others about what it means to me to be transgender. So even the mugs I made were made to address this very specific targeted audience. I began making them so that people could have affordable access to my artwork. I've been told to increase my prices and I won't do it. So what I'd like to say is I would like to pass the torch. I co-curated an exhibition at Ensika this year that included 8 trans and non-binary artists. My experience isn't like theirs, and I cannot tell anyone else's story. There needs to be other voices. And there are several who are now getting attention for their work about trans narratives, and I believe one of them at Baltimore Clayworks. My only hope is that their journey will be easier, although in our current political climate, it is unlikely. Being 50 years old this year has been tough. I was hospitalized after neck surgery with a bacterial infection in my spine. After I was released, I had to administer antibiotics intravenously to myself for 6 weeks and had to receive home health care. I now have to be on antibiotics twice a day until the end of next July. Going through this has kind of made me reevaluate what I'm doing, what I'm creating, and where I'm focusing all my energy. Truthfully, these pieces are fun to make, and these sell. um, 2 of them just sold in North Carolina. Don't fret. I will still make the work about being trans if I feel compelled to do so, but I'm no longer going to force myself to find something to say. I would really like to hear someone else's voice.